Yeah, just in terms of Nomad's renderer, you can get some pretty cool results out of it. So something I made a while ago. So just to take you through what's going on here, if I go back to the lighting menu here, I can just go back to matte cap or even just unlit. I'll just turn off everything just to show you what I've done. So if I go here, you can see that if I go into the lighting mode and matte cap and have show painting turned off, this is the base sculpt. So it's very simple. I've used painting on this surface. So if I turn on show painting, you can see that this is the color I've added. So that's just using in the toolbox here, using the paint mode over here, and just picking colors. So if I wanted to add a bit of a blue tinge, say some sort of like stubble on this rhino, I'm going to go to my color chooser over here on the left. I'm going to pick a color that looks like sort of a stubbly thing. You can see that when I choose, I get a preview on the mesh. So I'm going to choose a sort of a dark gray like that. And then I'm going to set my brush size with that slider there, and the brush intensity with this one. So I'm going to turn it right down. I'm just going to paint in a bit of a 5 o'clock shadow on him so he has a bit of stubble. And that's what I've done for this whole thing. So I've painted in little bits of green, little bits of pink, little bits of whatever to build up a color. But then in terms of getting a high quality render, you can then switch from the matte cap, which is sort of a fast preview one, to lit. And now I've got control over the over proper light and shadow. So what I've done here is I've picked an environment. So if you click on this image here, you can choose from a library of things, or you can go and pull in your own. So I've picked this outdoor sunlight one. I've rotated, I've changed the exposure to make it a little bit darker, and I've rotated it so that it gets nice highlights where I want them to be. And then I've used another single directional light. So if I choose it, you can see that's where it is, and I've rotated it to be where I want it to be, and this is casting shadows. And you can change the brightness of it as well. But the real sort of trick with Nomad, it's kind of secret weapon, is this other menu up the top here, this one here, which is post-process. So look at the difference between the regular renderer and when I turn post-process on, and you suddenly get all this extra very cool looking stuff. So in post-process, I'm going to go through and I'll turn off all the bits, and I'll show you what each one does, because they each have really cool effects. There are tutorials on YouTube for all this stuff, but I'll just go through it quickly for you. So that's turning off nearly everything. Okay, so anti-aliasing is basically, it'll try and take out jagged edges. So if you turn that on, you'll get slightly smoother, softer edges. You can barely make it out here, but it is doing useful stuff. Go right to the top of the menu. You've got reflections, so off and on. You can see that's doing really nice results of the shiny plane beneath there. Whoops, back to the menu. So environment. Sorry. Post-processing. So that's reflections. Global illumination is the really big one. So that adds sort of bounce light around. So if I turn up the intensity of the sunlight, so make that really bright, you can see that that's when I have GI turned on, you're getting sort of this extra light around here, which is sort of light bouncing off of the floor and back up onto the character, which is really cool. So turn that off, turn it on. And the rest do things. So ambient occlusion adds sort of contact shadows. That depth of field simulates a camera where you'll have bits of the image will go blurry where it's not in focus. So if I turn that on and I tap on the model to say where I want that to be focused, and then I can increase these settings, you see that the background goes blurry and the foreground can go blurry as well. So I can make it be focused on his eye and the rest looks blurry and soft. I'll turn that down a bit. Bloom adds sort of like a glow to things. So again, you can play with these settings. Turn it right down or up. I tend to have that off. Tone mapping is like you're applying filters. So you can have, if I reset this all to normal, you can affect the overall exposure, you can affect the contrast, and you can affect how saturated the colors are. Color grading is more controls. So you can see here I've added a bit more green in the image. I can turn that down and add a bit more red in the image. So you can have lots of fun there. You can also do sort of like quite extreme changes like that. Curvature will try and find sort of lumps and bumps in your model, and will add an extra tint to them. which is handy for bringing out extra detail. Chromatic aberration simulates sort of bad camera lens. So if I turn that up, you can see the edges get fringy, which can actually look pretty cool. It's a feature a lot of sort of modern image filters use. Vignette sort of also simulates the way bad cameras operate, where they have like sort of the image goes darker at the corners. So again, it's a little bit of extra realism there. It helps bring focus to the center. Grain simulates film grain, so you can see I'm adding sort of noise to the overall image. Sharpness applies like a fake sharpening, which can also help with the look. Pixel art makes it look like sort of a bad pixely old game. And scanlines adds scanlines. So with a combination of all these things, you can get some really nice looks. In fact, there's a bunch of presets coming very soon, so you can see you've got presets here. But so what I normally do is I'll turn on reflections, I'll turn on GI, I'll turn on occlusion a little bit of depth of field, a little bit of bloom, turn that right down, bit of tone mapping, like that, bit of saturation, bit of color grading perhaps. I'll just I will reset that, and I'll reset all of them, reset, and I'll just play with these until it looks kind of cool. Maybe like that. Curvature a little bit, just to bring out details. Chromatic aberration on the edges because it looks kind of cool. Vignette to make the outsides look a bit darker. A little bit of grain helps with detail. A little bit of sharpness to combat the depth of field. And that's kind of what I do. So then now when I hit export, back in the file menu, export PNG, you'll see it'll think for a bit. And then we get an image.